ever wonder why so many great initiatives in schools, businesses, and organizations fizzle out? It's not the idea that's the problem, it's the leadership behind it. Now, hear me out. Too often, leaders are pushed to launch new programs or manage big changes without the clarity, tools, or support they need to carry the vision forward. And when that happens, momentum dies, morale drops, and the mission stalls. Well, at Leadership on the Rocks, we believe successful initiatives start with well-equipped leaders. Our workshops give your leadership team a practical framework packed with tools for clarity, communication, collaboration, and execution. Here's how it works. 1, we listen to your needs. 2, we customize a high-impact leadership workshop just for you. And then 3, you build the kind of leadership culture that gets results and keeps them. Don't let another good idea die on the vine. Empower your leaders to lead with confidence and direction. Book your workshop today at leadershipontherocks.com, because when your leaders grow, everything else follows.
The moment that voice in your head, like what it is most terrified of, is the day that you wake up and you realize that these perfect records were never a prerequisite for purpose. We think if we have any mistakes to our name, any stumbles, any failings at all, then it automatically disqualifies us. But the truth is, we do not want our leaders to be perfect. We want their empathy instead. And like my friend Kim Butler says, our greatest points of impact will come from our deepest places of empathy.
This is the Leadership on the Rocks podcast, where we equip and empower leaders like you to thrive in and create harmony between your professional and personal lives. I'm your host, Bethany Reese, and in today's episode, we're going to be talking with Mary Marantz about being underestimated and how to start small and lead with confidence before you feel like you're ready. Mary Marantz is the best-selling author of Dirt and Underestimated, as well as a host of the popular podcast, The Mary Marantz Show. She grew up in a trailer in rural West Virginia and was the first in her family to go to college before going on to Yale for law school. Her work has been featured on CNN, MSN, Business Insider, Bustle, Thrive Global, Southern Living, Hallmark Home and Family, and more. She and her husband Justin live in an 1880s fixer-upper by the sea in New Haven, Connecticut, with their 2 fluffy golden retrievers, Goodspeed and Atticus. Learn more at marymarantz.com. Welcome to the Leadership on the Rocks podcast, Mary. I am so happy you're here.
Oh my gosh, Bethany, thank you so much for having me. I fell in love with you when we were both at the Camp for Creatives retreat a couple years ago in the Smoky Mountains with our mutual friend, Rebecca George. And I've just been looking forward to this so much since we got it on the calendar. So thanks for having me.
Oh, absolutely. Y'all, I have to tell you, we did meet at a retreat, but let me tell you how Mary just made me fall in love with her. Number one, she's so knowledgeable when it comes to just business in general, faith, and just how to go out and live life and do it and go and get it. But I was really impressed when you began rapping and singing Eminem's Lose Yourself. I was like, this is a kindred spirit. That's my girl. I was so excited. Yeah. I love your wit and your wisdom, and I'm so glad that you're here to share with our audience today about your book. So I'm excited to dive in.
Yeah, so fun fact, I would actually play Eminem's Lose Yourself every single morning when I was writing my first book, Dirt, because I did a whole first draft, like 50,000 plus word draft of Dirt that was like much more like a, sort of getting like all the poison out kind of version of that story. And then as soon as I handed it in, I was like, no, I want to take another stab at this, like this time through the lens of grace. And I only had 2 months to completely gut 50,000 words and rewrite them. We ended up with 70,000 words total. And every morning I would play that like this, do not miss your chance to blow. You get one shot, right? Mom, I love you, but this trailer's got to go, which Dirt is about growing up in a single wide trailer. So the Eminem does come out, and it comes out in Dirt if you're really looking for it.
Absolutely. Dirt is such a great book on just resilience and grit and all those things. But you are here with your newest book, Underestimated. I love it so much. You're talking about the biggest mountain that you've climbed is not the external. It's not the surroundings that you have. It was that internal journey. And I mean, I feel every ounce of this. I have chills right now as I'm talking, because you're stepping out into something that you don't feel ready for. For you, it's leaving that lifestyle in West Virginia, going on to college and law school. And then now you've become this amazing, successful business coach, podcaster, author, all these things. But you actually started stepping out and leading before you were ready. And that's why we're here to talk about this, to help our leaders listening. What helped you start stepping out and up before you felt like you were ready.
Yeah, we talk about this. So the whole book, Underestimated, is really about when fear gets loud and honestly just what a boring liar fear really is when we start to break it down. And I say at some point in the book, like, believe me, all those people that you are looking at and wishing you were like them, wishing you were where they are, I assure you that if they're doing it right, most of them feel scared out of their mind most days of their lives. I
Agree.
know I do. There's hardly a day that goes by now where I'm not doing something that's got me sweaty. And it's if you let yourself fall in love with that, it's actually exhilarating. And it becomes, in a really weird way, being uncomfortable becomes comfortable, becomes the familiar, and you really do build up a tolerance for it the more you do it.
That's amazing. I love it. You call fear a boring liar because it does. It lies to us all the time. There is a quote by actually the Duke himself, the actor John Wayne. He's like, courage is being afraid and saddling up anyway. And I
Yeah.
think about that, but I love that you're calling fear that boring liar.
Mm.
What are the lies that fear tells us that we believe?
Yeah. Yeah. So in addition to being an author and a podcast host, like you mentioned, I also am a coach. And I got on this streak once where I was doing a bunch of coaching calls with my people. And I was noticing that like fear was showing up in each of their lives in almost identically the same way and almost identically at the same point in the process. Like, oh, take a major step forward to make, good on the dream. Like maybe they booked a 2-day intensive to come here and map out their book proposal. It was like, and enter existential dread. That makes them feel like they have to question everything before, I have to think about my whole life before I go on to the next stage, Dewey Cox style. And I was just really frustrated with it, Bethany, and I pulled out my phone. I didn't even really introduce it at all. I just started going, it's all been done. It's all been done better. It's all been done by somebody the world actually wants to pay attention to. I can't start until it's perfect. I can't start until I am perfect. I can't start until I know every single step in the staircase and have the perfect blueprint. What if I start and the critics come? What if they say, who does he or she think she is? What if I start and I can't stay consistent with it? What if I don't have the bandwidth or the resources right now? What if my voice doesn't really matter? What if I don't really matter? What if it's already too late? And then I looked in the camera and I said, fear is not your friend. Start anyway. Start now. And I just put it up because I was just feeling really spicy that day and it just sort of super took off. And that really becomes the backbone and the premise of this book is that fear's a really boring liar and the same broken scripts it uses on me, it also uses on you, Bethany. The ones it uses on you, it uses on me. And the people listening, same thing. And it really, if we even go like all the way back to some like, ancient texts like the Bible, for example, we see fear showing up in the lives of the people there the same way that it's showing up in the year of our Lord 2025. And so the two dots that connected in my brain in this really powerful, visceral way, that's like the high every writer is chasing. You know this with a book coming out
Uh-huh.
soon. I don't know if you've announced that or announced the title or anything. I don't want to give anything away, but I know you've got a book coming soon.
I do, and I'm excited. We'll talk about that later, though.
Okay. These two dots connected, and this is what writers live for. You've never seen it connected quite this way, and it was, what if fear attacks creatives and creative leaders in particular because it is jealous that it itself is not creative or a leader in any
Ooh.
way? And that was just sort of like a moment. And we can go on to talk about this. I say fear's not a very creative guy, but he is a
Mhm.
productive guy, a busy guy. And like any good productive overachiever, he has learned how to prioritize. So hide in plain sight, play small, fear's going to leave you alone. Show up and start to do work that matters. You better expect fear to show up teeth bared and snarling. Yeah.
Absolutely. I almost feel like you're my therapist because you just were in my head for so many things, so many thoughts. I left an industry that I was very comfortable in education to start a business. What do I know about business? What do I know about podcasting? What do I know about writing a book? All these,
Mm,
every question that you just like dumped out. I'm like, yes, yes, I have felt that. And I know everybody
yeah.
listening has too. And it can stall us so bad. In my mind, thinking about all the things you said, I just see fear as this big shadow, big scary shadow. And if I
Mm,
actually turn and look towards the light that's illuminating it, it's probably this small little thing that I could just flick with
yes.
my fingernail and be like, be gone.
Yeah, you know what?
You know?
I love that. I love that you said that. Very similarly, I was on the This Changes Everything podcast with Sarah Rice, and she was talking about how it's kind of like in The Wizard of Oz, where it's like the great and powerful
Yeah.
Oz, the cowardly lion runs away, and we pull back the curtain, and it's just a snake oil salesman, really. And
Oh,
it's that
yeah.
same idea. The faster we can identify the version of fear that has showed up, the faster we're going to be able to pull back that curtain or shine a light in the darkness and see that there was really nothing to be afraid of.
Oh, that's so good. So let's talk about one specific fear that I know probably most of our listeners who are in leadership or want to get in leadership probably struggle with, and that's imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
We throw around that phrase and we can shake our heads. Yeah, I know what that is. But I'm huge in education. We got to define it. So can you give us
Yes.
kind of a definition of imposter syndrome that we can cling to as we kind of then dissect it and talk about how to get rid of it?
Yeah, I love that. On my show, I always joke like I went to law school. I'm a lawyer. I love a working definition. So I am
Yeah.
so on board for this. So syndrome, what we all call imposter syndrome, originated. The phrase was coined by two psychologists named Clance and Imes, who in their original study actually called it the imposter phenomenon among high achieving women in particular. They talked about women in particular. And I write in the book, I like that better, if I'm being honest. Syndrome makes me feel like the lone patient zero who has this only case of self-sabotage, not seen since the turn of the century, right? And I have to
Yeah.
quarantine in isolation to get rid of it. Phenomenon makes it feel like it's something we are all learning to navigate together, and we're sort of in it together. And so, imposter phenomenon is really based around the idea, a lot of people will talk about imposter syndrome. They may even reference Clance and Imes, but you can kind of tell that they haven't necessarily really opened up the study and dug into it because there's such a backbone there of what they believe is causing it. And it's kind of a habit loop in the form of what they call magical ritual thinking. Magical ritual thinking, kind of like a baseball player wearing his dirty socks over and over. I just was not like against my will was served up an article that told me that Patrick Mahomes doesn't like to change his underwear when he's in the
Oh no.
playoffs. I was like, this is information I did not need, but okay, there it is. And now all of you listening have just had it served on you as well.
There you go.
But it's like that idea. It's like a superstition. And for us, for those of us who are high achieving with imposter phenomenon, with imposter syndrome, that ritual is that we believe the second we stop expecting ourselves to fail, like the second we start to believe we might actually succeed, will be the moment when we actually fail. We think we have to doubt ourselves down to the point of, I'm a fraud, I'm going to be found out, I shouldn't even show up. All of this could be taken away in an instant. That if we ever stop feeling that way, that will be the moment that is our undoing. And
Oh,
so we go deep in that chapter about, where it comes from, that we can take some solace in the fact that if we do feel like an imposter, it probably means we're a high achiever. It doesn't really attack those who are resigned to mediocrity. But that we begin to undo that ritual through these small but significant shifts. That's what the book is centered around. Each chapter of fear, we talk about a small shift that moves us forward, where we're kind of developing this evidence to the contrary of like, look, I didn't rip myself to shreds and I still showed up the way I wanted to. I still, had the outcome or the excellence in my work that I wanted to. So I don't need to do this to myself. I don't need to pretend like the most interesting thing about me is how hard I am on myself in order to produce excellent work and excellent leadership.
man, that's so good. And talking about a mind shift, that is so hard to do. We are so stuck in the ruts of our habits of thinking.
Yeah.
And I love it. I mean, this ties it back to you said the hardest thing that you overcame was not external, it was internal.
Mm,
How do we think? How do we capture those thoughts? How do we talk to ourselves? When do we
mm,
listen to ourselves and it's not a good voice? But you
yeah.
actually talk about that in the book. I say so often, and people in this podcast know, I say we got to stop, necessarily just automatically listening to ourselves and learn to talk to ourselves. But you
Yeah.
talk about your inner critic, and you even gave yours a name. I cannot wait for you to share. Can you tell us about your inner critic and what his or her name is?
That's right. That's right. Well, a little tiny bit of backstory to kind of set it up is I had seen an interview with Hugh Jackman and Ryan Reynolds. They were sort of PRing their new movie at the time, new movie, Deadpool and Wolverine. And Hugh Jackman said to Ryan Reynolds, listen, you've been really upfront about dealing with anxiety and like you've really kind of pulled back that curtain and given a lot of people permission to think about and talk about their anxiety. But I'm curious, like, how does that show up in your work? Like, have you been able to use that to your advantage in any ways, or is it something you have to overcome every time you show up? And what Ryan Reynolds said rang so true and so familiar to me that it just stopped me in my tracks. He said, what it does is when I am acting in a movie, I'm not just the actor reading my lines. I am also sitting in the audience as its harshest critic. I'm sitting there
Oh,
going, I don't buy that. I don't believe that. That wasn't very good. Let's do another take of that. He said it
mhm.
gives me an ecosystem of awareness to kind of anticipate every, grenade, I'm adding this part, and every grenade of criticism that could be lobbed his way. And I say, me, I've become so familiar with the voice in my head that as the inner critic, I've given him, and my inner critic is sort of particularly defined as a him, Dear John. And I say, Dear John has genes Wears khaki pants or jeans that are creased and crisp from the iron. His pale plaid crisscross LL Bean wrinkle-free shirt of, taupe and tan and ecru is there to remind me not to color outside of his boring beige lines. He hates,
Mm.
absolutely hates that I talked about Care Bears in a very serious thought leader book. What are you, like an amateur? Are you expecting them to laugh at you? And his, LA looks gelled hair is all crispy and hard. He's all hard edges,
Mm.
no soft lines, all IQ, no EQ. And he thinks that my full range of access to my emotions makes me seem hysterical and weak, but most of all, true to his name, Dear John tries to get me to break up with my dreams before they become a bother to anybody.
Oh, it's so good. It's so good. You know what I'm
Yep.
picturing is a bunch of movies from the 80s with like the
Yeah.
popular group, like totally judging everybody else.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, there's a part where I'm like, he's just like sneering over my shoulder with every
Yeah.
word I write, like so derivative, you know? Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Oh, so how do you, I don't know, do you make friends with Dear John, the inner critic? I mean,
Yeah.
how do you live life whenever he's constantly there judging you? How do you move forward anyway? Because you
Yeah.
have done amazing things anyway, despite
Right.
whatever Dear John is, judging you for and looking at you with those looks.
Yeah, and I love you underlining that word anyway, because the subtitle is the surprisingly simple shift to quit playing small, name the fear, and move forward anyway. We're going to do it anyway, right? And so it
Mm.
is a two-part answer. The first part is like it is very hard to make friends with this character of Dear John in particular when I've described what a bully he is. And I go into much greater detail of like the serial killer, origami he hands me with minute by minute timestamp notes on how I can be a better speaker, which is a
Mm.
true story. That part's a
Oh,
true story. That's referencing a speaking in Minneapolis and somebody in the audience doing that. And he's a bully and he's not a very nice guy. And there's a part at the end of that
mm.
section that says, "Listen, the people who love us will love us without fail, and the people who don't, we're never going to get us anyway. Dear John is somebody who was never going to get me anyway. So why do I try so hard to make him love me?" So that's the first part. Is that when you
Oh,
first start to recognize your inner critic for the bully he is, you can feel anger, and there's a process of like just
mm.
processing the anger.
Yeah.
The second part of that, and this is where the whole rest of that chapter goes, is really understanding who that inner critic might be. Because I've been describing him as this, full grown bully of a fella in my head. And now we start to get into protective parts and internal family systems and the inner critic that is born to keep us safe. And there's this really beautiful
Mm.
part near the end of that chapter where Dr. Martha Sweezy walks us through a script that says, one of the things you can ask your inner critic is, how old do you think I currently am? And you might be
Oh.
very surprised at its answer. Maybe it's going to say 5 years old, 3 years old, 10 years old, whatever it was. This age you were when a protective part first needed to be born. And I will just add this. This is going to rock your world. It rocked mine. Whew, I'm going to try to get through this. I had Britt Frank on my podcast just a couple of days ago. We were recording, and I was telling her about what I just said to you, just like that. And she goes,
Mhm.
"That's so interesting. I love Dr. Sweezy. They both do internal family systems." She was like, "Here's another question we can throw into the mix. Ask your inner critic how old it is." And we
Oh,
may be
wow.
surprised to find out it's just a toddler throwing a tantrum.
Mhm.
When a toddler wants to say, "I'm hungry," they don't say, "I'm hungry." They might say, "I hate you." "Why are
Yeah.
you the worst?" And so that made me want to just, burst into tears. Both how old was I when that part had to be born and how old is
Mhm.
that part? Have they remained?
That is so true. I think even as we age, and I'm proud to say I am middle-aged and graying, but man, I love where I'm at in life and the lessons that I've
Hmm.
learned so far. But in the workplace, I have discovered that I can still feel, and people that I work with and people that I serve can still feel like the junior high kid
Yeah.
sitting at the table, fighting for status, fighting for worth, fighting for all these things. And, so really, we adults in our places of work and the people that we lead, we are still struggling with so much of that internal things that, that have, like you said, that was born to defend us in a certain moment in our life. And it could be from childhood. And we're taking all of that into our leadership with us. And we have to do battle with ourselves. We have to go in and find healing in those things and quiet that, listen, quiet, find anger, I don't know, make peace with it so that we can come out of it a healthier leader. Because if you're carrying around the junior high parts of yourself, they're going to shine in moments where you need to lead well. I
That's
always say
right.
whenever those hardships really come, the inner parts of you are really going to be magnified. And
Mm,
unfortunately, so much of that can be the ugly parts of ourselves.
yeah.
And I just love this work that you're doing to help us work through that. Who
Yeah.
is your dear John? Who is the voice in your head? What are they saying? How old are they? And, how old do you think I am? I love those questions. I'm telling you,
Mhm.
this is therapy. This is therapy in a podcast right now.
Yeah, I love that. I love that.
Um, so, in thinking about, all right, so we've talked about the fear. Fear is a boring liar. It's going to say all these things. You have that inner voice in your head, guys. Go out and give them an avatar, give them a name, describe them. Because when you shine a light on them, they shrink. It's so important. But there's other things that keep us, from stepping into what God has called us to.
Mm.
And one of those I particularly struggle with is perfectionism.
Ooh, same.
Yeah, it's if it's not polished, if it's not perfect, I don't want to put it out. And the battle that I continually fight is that it doesn't have to be polished or perfect because I'm always a work in progress. Perfection is not
Mhm.
possible. Like these are the counter narratives that I have. Can you walk us through that perfection trap? Because so many of us sit
Yeah.
in it.
Yeah, 100%. I would say that, each chapter is a different face of fear. There are 14 in total. I have for sure lived all 14. I was on a radio interview yesterday for What's Brewing Wisconsin, and they were like, people can just flip to the chapter that's the one they struggle with the most. And I was like, listen, if they can do that, I'm super jealous of them because I need all 14. I need all
Yeah.
14. But I do think that of those 14, the one that has been the most pervasive, or at least the most front facing,
Mhm.
in my life is chapter 10. Perfectionism is hiding with better PR. So, like, what if
Ooh.
hiding just hired itself a really good marketing team, a Don Draper, Mad Men marketing team, PR
Mhm.
company, and said, listen, do for me what you did for cauliflower. you
There you
know,
go.
take something really bland and make it seem really desirable, right?
Yeah.
I
Make
joke
it
in the book.
pizza.
That's right. Make it pizza, make it rice, whatever. I mean, rice is not that great either, but you know what I mean. And I say, not since the Got Milk people has there been an ad campaign that tried to make something so plain Jane vanilla seem so sexy and so sought
Mhm.
after. And what it has done, and we see this we for sure see it across our American society. I know you have a lot of people listening in Europe. I wonder if it's as pervasive there. But what we see is that being a perfectionist is actually kind of treated like a good thing, like a noble thing, right? For
Oh.
years in my life, I would be like, well, of course I haven't put that out there yet. I'm such a perfectionist. I need to make sure every detail is right.
Mhm.
Like, of course I can't just like, slap it up together like good is better than, done is better than perfect. Like, what are you talking about? I have a higher level of excellence I hold myself to. We think that it is an A+ person thing, an overachiever thing, this thing that only
Mhm.
those of us who hold ourselves to the highest standard of excellence deal with. But what we're not willing to say is, I'm actually hiding in plain sight. I'm actually
Oh,
afraid it's
wow.
not any good. I'm actually afraid I'll be criticized. I'm afraid I'll be embarrassed, or I'm afraid I'll put it out there and then I'll actually have to do something about it. And
Mm.
so what a tricky sleight of hand for fear to do, to take something. If you had a friend who was like, "Hi, I'm hiding in plain sight," you'd be like, maybe stop doing that. If they go, "Oh, I'm such a perfectionist," it's like, wow, you really
Mhm.
are like so put together and so like up here.
Yeah.
And in Slow Growth, which is my second book, Slow Growth Equals Strong Roots, I talk about this idea of the most put together woman in the room, not because she would ever describe herself that way, and not because she wants to make anyone else feel small, but because she believes that's the bare minimum standard she must hit just to walk into most rooms, just to be invited to most tables. And let me tell you something, Bethany, that chapter goes deep, deep. We can talk about it more if you want to, but I'll just tell you that it ends by talking about, we think if we're perfect enough, we'll be accepted, chosen, find belonging, loved. Let's just
Mhm.
call it what it is. We think if we're perfect enough, no one will ever leave us again. And
Oh,
it's
wow.
talking about when my mom left when I was 9, and I'll
Mhm.
show you, and it becomes
Yeah.
kind of a weapon. So there's a lot to unpack in that chapter for sure.
There is. And it's amazing when you peel away all the stinky layers of the onion, what our motivations really are. Is
Yeah.
it I'll show you? Is it I'm trying to prove to myself, to my parents, to friends, or I don't know. There's so many different things and it's different for everybody.
Yeah.
So we have these fears, we have to deal with them, we have to name them. But how do we what are those changes, that mind shift that we make to overcome all of this? We're underestimating ourselves. We're disqualifying ourselves, I think, for a lot of different leadership ways and positions and influence.
Mm.
Leadership is not just a position and a title, it is influence. And we disqualify ourselves from that. We underestimate what we can truly do. So how do we make that shift? I mean, how do we, I know in your book you say, quit playing small. by starting small. And I
Right.
love that. I just love any kind of alliteration. But what do you mean by that? How can
Mm.
we start making these shifts out?
Yeah, so chapter 3 is actually self-sabotage is a shot glass. And spoiler alert, that chapter is not about, drinking your way into oblivion. It has nothing to do with alcohol really at all. What had happened, and I first have to kind of like admit a guilty pleasure to both you and all of your listeners around the world, which is that my guilty pleasure is I love to follow really cheesy success accounts on Instagram. So
I
some
love it.
people have, the Kardashians or the Bachelor in Paradise or
Yeah.
Purgatory or whatever, where you might not get picked, but you're still not going home, whatever. For me, I really love those accounts that have like a lion superimposed over a Lamborghini, roar until you get everything you came for, because they make me laugh. And then there's like, the black and white scripty font Albert Einstein quotes that were definitely never said by him. The
Hmm.
internet is horrible, Albert Einstein, whatever. Um, so I follow a bunch of them. And then this one day, totally out of character, this one quick scroll by is a post that actually kind of rocked my world. And it was a picture of a little shot glass filled to the brim. And it said, if you think you have the capacity of a shot glass, then anytime you get a little bit more than that, you will subconsciously shrink yourself. And then I added this part until you fit back into the tiny containers you believe you belong in.
Oh, wow.
I know. And it said you have to
Yeah.
expand your capacity, expand it until it's an infinity pool. And like, of course, it had to be an infinity pool on an account like
Hmm.
that. But the point was there, and it's the clearest explanation of self sabotage I'd ever seen. And very, very, very shortly after that, I had Dr. Allison Cook, who's a dear friend of mine, on my podcast, The Mary Marantz Show. And I was telling her about that post. And I was like, how do we stop doing that if most of the time it's happening subconsciously, if we don't even know we're doing it? And we pulled up this part of her book where she talked about if you didn't grow up with a lot of stability in your childhood, if you had chaos in your childhood, it can send you into a pretty permanent feeling sense of inner chaos and survival mode. And we have to reteach ourselves safety. And she said you do that by setting small but important commitments to yourself. They have to be little to begin with, but they also have to matter to you. And then actually keeping them. And she said, as you honor yourself by keeping those promises, both big and small, then she looked me right in the eye. She said, you are becoming the grown up in the room who can be trusted. That grown up is you. And I just
Hmm.
burst into tears on the spot because I realized for so many of us, something happened in our story that made us feel like we couldn't trust anyone, including ourselves.
Oh, yes.
And so we were talking about the shift right after that chapter is one of the first breakout, sections in the book. There are 4 of them in total. The shift, the scenic overlook 1, the scenic overlook 2, and the summit.
Hmm.
And the shift says, I read an article once that said the best ideas are a switch, not a dial. They flip our thinking on its head rather than just turning the volume up on what we were already
Oh,
thinking.
wow.
And it says the common wisdom, I say, is the opposite of playing small. It's got the go big moment. Leap and the net will appear. And I'm a big fan of those moments. I've had some of them in my life, getting into Yale for law school, signing a 5-book
Hmm.
deal with my publisher, coast to coast speaking tour with my face on the side of a bus, right?
Nice.
Pretty good. Pretty
Yeah.
good. That should do it, right? And yet the very next day, the day after our hero gets everything they ever wanted,
Hmm.
I went right back to playing small,
Yeah.
doubting myself, because those were things that felt like they happened to me, not things that I had become. It wasn't an
Hmm.
identity. And so we don't go to the gym once and think we're suddenly a gym rat. We're suddenly in shape. We do that every single day. And over time, it becomes a part of who we are. So paradoxically, some of the most important work we will do to quit playing small is actually by starting small.
Wow. I love that so much. In everything, thinking about just underestimating ourselves as leaders or people underestimating, whatever that motivation is, you know, how you think about it is what sets you up on the track. And I love what you were saying is stop thinking that you're one thing and you're always on this path and this journey to becoming something greater, something
Yeah.
different, something, you don't have to work to have some sort of success and then go right back to thinking that, well, you're not successful and you're not worthy and you're not all those things. Like
Mm.
take those steps in the journey and keep looking forward. I love how you're just encouraging us with your own story. And I thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
So let's talk about, you said flipping the script. I love that too. It's so many visuals I love. It's not a dial. It is literally a flip of the switch. Like
Yeah.
let's change. And as we look at, you know, growing ourselves, and we may start with proving to ourselves that we can do it by overcoming those fears and being successful. that's actually not the point.
Mm,
And I think this ties so deeply with the heart of leadership.
yes.
Leaders are there to serve, to promote others, not promote self.
Hmm.
Um, and you talk in the book, and I love this, where you're not proving yourself anymore. You're guiding others. You're
Right.
helping lead others along the way. Can you talk about that shift?
Yeah, so this is actually, we really get into this in the final chapter of the book. This is chapter 14, Success is a Slippery Slope. And it's talking about, there's a whole running metaphor throughout the whole book of this feeling of pushing a boulder up the mountain over and over and over again, only to get almost to the top, almost to your breakthrough moment. And at the very last
Mhm.
second, when you realize all the eyes watching from home, oh, wait, people are going to read this book. They're going to listen to this podcast. They're going to watch me on stage. Like, what? You self-consciously glance back down at yourself. You blink. You lose your grip, you lose your way, and the boulder rolls
Mm.
all the way back down the mountain. In a lot of the podcast episodes, people have been saying, yeah, and it kind of crushes you in the process. You get sort of flattened in the process. There's a part in chapter 1 where I'm talking about this mountain, and I joke about like Wile E. Coyote about to get his comeuppance just before the bottom drops off, and it
Oh,
drops
yeah.
out, and it all falls off the proverbial cliff. We freeze when we make eye contact with everyone watching at home.
Hmm.
And so in chapter 14, I compare that mountain we've been climbing with something in the business world that is called the survival to success, the survival to significance, ultimately hierarchy. And, if you picture like a bunch of bar graphs butted up against one another, if you start a business, for example, you're in survival mode in the beginning, just trying to like barely scrape by. Then you get a little bit more, and maybe you're in some stability, like you're mostly covering your bills every month. Then you get to security, you got a little bit more than enough. Then people start
Hmm.
calling you a success. And the assumption I had my whole life as a 20-year plus full-time self-employed entrepreneur, creative entrepreneur, is that if I just pushed up that mountain long enough, I would inevitably and eventually reach significance. That if you pushed and pushed and pushed from the place of people calling you a success, eventually and inevitably significance would occur. And I had this vision that came to me a few years ago. I say in the book, and this is how it really felt in real life. It was like a slide advance, like an old school slide in like the classroom. You'll appreciate that.
Oh, yeah.
Or like a Don Draper worthy Kodak carousel. It was in and it was out. And the picture was that there's actually a gap, I say a speed worthy, it's finished on the map gap between success and significance. Because there's also this running metaphor about the ledge come back around, and will you take the next leap?
Hmm.
And the reason we keep rolling back down the mountain is because all of those previous steps are ultimately about us.
Hmm.
Our starting, our surviving, our stability, our security, our success, and also the negative, the scarcity inverses of those, are being embarrassed, are being criticized, are being disappointed, the people who might ultimately hurt us. And that leap between the two, that we have to make the choice to either make the leap at the top or continually keep sliding back down, because it feels a lot safer to be the underdog than to be the one who actually arrives at success and then has to move beyond success to do something with it for others. That gap is called it finally stops being about you
Oh,
and you
amen.
proving other people how far you've come. And I've
Hmm.
used that jet fuel for years, for decades in my life, only to find myself this really hollowed out, burned out shell of a person, because it turns out proving other people wrong is not a sustainable form of fuel. If we want to truly make it not only to the top of this mountain, but to become, make that true transformation to significance, where we're the guide in somebody else's story, we need a fuel that's far more renewable, and that's we are driven by purpose. Bethany, I wrote this book 12 hours a day for 12 months straight.
Oh, wow.
And the number of times I wanted to lay down on the ground and quit, temper tantrum style, like
Hmm.
I don't have it in me anymore. I don't have any more in me.
Yeah.
But what got me up off the ground every single time was a picture as clear as any in my head of actual faces, 4 faces of avatars, like people I know in real life who are avatars for who this book is going to change.
Hmm.
These hard story people who are already doing so much to be the generation changers in their family tree, but they keep coming up against that why is it so hard at the top moment.
Yeah.
And I know that if those people can get set free of fear, the ripple effects in the world are just going to go on and on and on. So and working for them and helping to like get this message in their hands is what picks me up. Not, ooh, I might get to sell a bunch of books.
Yeah. And you're speaking to the heart of the matter of stop looking at yourself and self promotion and start looking how can you help others. When your purpose becomes bigger than you, the I love that it's sustainable. Like your
Mm,
energy will never stop flowing because
that's
it's
right.
always about how can I help lift up the other person. And it gives you the courage to move forward, to pick yourself up off the floor, to step into that hard conversation, leaders, to, lead in the middle of chaos, no matter what situation you're going through right now at work or at home, to
Mm,
say, I love them enough. I love serving and wanting to make the world a better place. I'm going to step in, even though I have that fear. I'm going to look at
yeah.
fear and say, you don't own me. I'm going. And because your purpose is bigger than that. And I just love that you're calling us out to that, to remember. I hate to use this phrase. So remember your why. It's so much deeper than that. I hate
Mm,
whenever they take something that really does have great meaning, but then they just overuse it. And then everybody's like, ah,
mm.
I hate that phrase,
I
which I
love
now
that
hate
phrase
that phrase.
personally, but
Yeah.
I know what you mean.
Yeah.
I know what
Well,
you mean. It's like authenticity. It's like you can't say I value
yes.
authenticity more. It's like, really? Because I was saying it before. It's cool.
I
Yeah.
know, and
Yeah.
there's such good words to guide us, but the overuse of them, and now think about all the reels that people are watching that make fun of it. Especially in schools right now. School education's hard. Remember your why.
Okay.
Oh, but you're giving us something to say, well, what is your purpose? How are you serving? And I think that's a different way of saying the same thing because our why should always be bigger than ourselves. So
Yeah.
so good. All right. So it's not leadership and all of these things. It's not about arrival. It's about impact. It's about that
Hmm.
significance. I love it. Going from your first, most of us in our careers, our industries, or life in general, we want success, but then it goes past success to that significance.
Mm.
And so I just, what does it look like for you, for a leader, to truly step into a role before you feel qualified, before you feel ready? Can you give us the creme de la creme of all the things, like your whole book lays out the fears that we're going to have and how we kind of lay that out? But what does a successful journey look like of someone who recognizes, yeah, that's my fear talking over my shoulder, that's my inner critic?
Mm.
What does success look like when we step into something we feel unqualified for, but we do it anyway? Can you give us just a short little, like, this is what it looks like?
Yeah. I think so much what it's kind of boiling down to is one of the things I talk about in the book is that we really over idealize other people. We put on
Ooh.
these perfecting filter glasses where we assume and ascribe to them perfect records that do not exist. We think they never once stumble. We think they sat down and strategized a step-by-step 42-point plan from the very beginning and never once deviated from it. We think that everything that's happening for them, they were like, I knew this was going to happen 24 months ago. We ascribe to them strategies and um, you know like I said, these perfect records, that there were no disappointments, there were no stumbles, there were no like, wow, that really flopped, no bad launches, no self-doubt along the way. We think that they will always show up better than us. And we think that, chapter 4 is about second guessing, is a missing handbook. We think that other people got the handbook we never got. And so we're always stumbling our way through while they know the exact shortcut to follow. And so what I would say to them is that the people you are looking up to right now, we have to stop ascribing to them the perfect records I talk about, this idea that they never once started over, stumbled, had stutters and starts and stops again. They have the same setbacks you do. They have the same frustrations you do. The only difference between where they are and where you are is that they did not allow that to make them quit. You are sitting there thinking that you have to have it all figured out before you can
Mhm.
get started. But the truth is, you get started and then you figure it out along the way, right? And that's like this thing that like we don't want to hear because we want to have the perfect blueprint handed to us.
Mhm.
But the truth is, even if somebody did lay that out for you, then all they're doing is showing you a well-worn path for how to be somebody else, not to be the you that you were created to be, this original who was put here for one specific, unique purpose that only the crosshair intersection of your gifts and your story can achieve in this world. There's only ever been one you, there will only ever be one you, and the work that will be accomplished through you will never be able to be repeated. That is both such a powerful calling, and it means that we also don't get to hide in plain sight because there's somebody who is waiting to hear it the way that you would say it in particular, right? And so, yes, I would just say all of that. And I feel like, like I could have just dropped the mic there on the, we get started to figure it out. But ultimately, what we're working through here is that none of this, one of the things that I say in the book, I did it in an Instagram post yesterday. Maybe this is our mic drop moment, is that the moment that voice in your head, like what it is most terrified of, is the day that you wake up and you realize that these perfect records were never a prerequisite for purpose. We think
Oh.
if we have any mistakes to our name, any stumbles, any failings at all, then it automatically disqualifies us. But the
Mhm.
truth is, we do not want our leaders to be perfect. We want their empathy instead. And like my friend Kim Butler says, our greatest points of impact will come from our deepest places of empathy. So I'm going to give you, we'll recap that. The one I just said about empathy and impact, that's one. Two is that we are going to get started to figure it out, not the other way around. Wait to figure it out before we get started. And then ultimately, perfect records were not a prerequisite for purpose.
Look at this. I normally ask about key takeaways, but you already give them to us because you
Amazing.
know how the brain works.
Yeah.
I love it. It's so good. You have given us so much you know, I really feel like you've given us the weapons to fight that internal battle. And not that it has to be a battle. Ultimately, we want it to come to an internal peace where we move forward with that humble confidence, humble, really realizing I don't have to be perfect. There is no perfection. That I am dependent upon God to lead me in those things, but also the confidence to go do it anyway, to get
Mm.
started. And I just thank you so much, Mary, for sharing that. But now that you've shared all of these amazing things of what we need to do to lead well, what's one poor decision that you would warn our leaders to avoid? Like, come on, leaders, don't do this one thing. Come on, guys, you're better than that. What's that
Yeah.
one poor decision?
I think the one poor decision that so many of us fall into, I know I'm raising my hand first, that we really have to let go of is this idea that our success or us ultimately doing the thing we were most created to do, being the leader we were meant to be, reaching that place of significance is dependent on some sort of external approval that we feel like I know I've felt for years like I was waiting on like if that person would just read my book, if they would just tap me on the shoulder, tap me on the forehead, tap to like that
Mhm.
post on Instagram, then I would have made it and I would have arrived. And I don't know, maybe short of Oprah. I don't really know if that person exists. And I got to tell you, I've had years of chasing that for it to happen. And then I've had moments when
Mhm.
it did happen, not Oprah, but other very, very, very big platform people shared dirt and it did
Yeah.
not change my life.
Yeah.
It did not change my life overnight. And so we're constantly waiting for this moment of arrival, this moment of approval from this external source, when
Mhm.
in reality, approval and belonging and purpose were always inside jobs. They were always inside jobs. Like I always say, there's no amount of more that will ever make you stop feeling less than. And so when I'm talking about an inside job, specifically from a faith perspective, I'm talking about where your identity lies and this confidence that the good work that was prepared for you in advance does not require a co-signature from anybody else on this planet.
Oh,
Yeah,
that is good. I
yeah,
love that.
yeah. So I'll say that. And then one thing I just want to note for your listeners, you mentioned earlier, you said something about very visual pictures. That is really the great work of this book in my mind
Mhm.
is there are so many slippery faces that fears chameleoning through, really shape-shifting through. And if I can as a teacher, you'll appreciate this, teaching our photography courses, we realize this first, if I can teach in very unexpected, visceral visuals and stories, then I know the human brain is going to remember them better. The greatest
Mhm.
teacher on the planet who walked the planet
Yes,
taught in story and metaphor. And when the first
absolutely.
metaphor didn't land, he just told another one. you know? And so every face of fear, as you read this book start to finish, is given a really unexpected visual to represent it. For example, the missing handbook in chapter 4, I talk about how that's like walking around like Edward Scissorhands. We feel like we're missing all the pertinent parts. And it goes through this whole big description of that. What that's actually doing is it's allowing you to have much quicker recall. So the
Mhm.
next time fear gets loud, you can go, Oliver Twist problem, research
Yeah.
Riptide, Princess and the Pea problem, Edward Scissorhands. I mean, times infinity throughout this book. And the quicker you can catch it, the quicker you can pull back that curtain, Wizard of Oz style, and it sucks all the power that fear has out of the room. So that's, just something that I really want your listeners to understand is we talked about like key takeaways or whatever is get this
Mhm.
book and read this book start to finish. That's my main takeaway
Absolutely.
for you.
And anchor on those visuals that you have. We talk a lot about mantras and visuals on the podcast anyway, especially for application of delivering, messages communication wise.
Yeah.
But I love it that your book has that. And sometimes we forget to do that for ourselves, for that, again, the internal battle that we're facing.
Yeah.
And so I love it that your book has that. Thank you so much. So, Mary, where can our listeners go to one, buy Underestimated? And then where can they go to learn more about you and just your amazing platforms? And also, guys, her social media. I love following it. It's so fun. So where can we go
Nice.
to connect with you?
Yeah, I'm going to tell you people about two fun things actually. The first is I introduce these characters the first time in slow growth equals strong roots, but they carry over into underestimated. They are the 5 achiever types. And in underestimated, we're talking about how the different achiever types get tripped up playing small and how they get them unstuck. And so they are the performer, always on their toes. They need to show both themselves, but also other people how far they've come, which is what I am. The tightrope walker could care less who's clapping, but they need higher and higher death-defying feats to feel the same amount of good. The masquerader is the one shoving other people into the spotlight while they hide in plain sight. The contortionist is our classic people pleaser. They contort because it is easier than to be criticized. And then the illusionist in the distance believes that all the conditions to begin and they themselves must be perfect before they can even start. And so if you go to achieverquiz.com or marymarantz.com/quiz, my last name is Marantz. The quiz takes like 2 minutes to take. It's 10 super fun, lighthearted questions. And in true Mary form, we go fun with the questions and deep with the results. And so I'm going to tell you based on your type how you get stuck playing small and how you actually start to move out of that. So that's at achieverquiz.com. And then if you go to namethefear.com right now, for all of your listeners, we have actually put up there, Bethany, where they can grab the entire first chapter for free. They can download it for free right now. And read it and get a feel for my writing style, for all of those fun visuals that we talked about, the Wile E. Coyote reference. While you're there, if you want to pre-order the book, pre-orders literally make the entire difference in whether Amazon shows this book and recommends this book, whether it ever ends up on shelves in physical stores, which you have no idea how hard that's becoming. Pre-orders make all the difference in getting good, excellent original books out into the world. Then we have the whole first 3 chapters available for you if you pre-order. And even more important than that is the entire audiobook. When it becomes available on April 29th, you will get that in addition to the hardcover book you pre-order. So it's like getting 2 books for the price of 1. I read the audiobook, so if you've enjoyed this past hour, then you would love the audiobook. And that's at namethefear.com. And I'm at Mary Marantz on Instagram. Come tell me what your achiever type is. Come tell me if you took the quiz. Come tell me if you read the chapter. If you listen to the episode, tell me all the things.
I love it. You are so giving, and that just shows the heart. I mean, number one, I cannot wait to take that quiz. I want to know what kind of achiever I have. I immediately had I think that's me, but I would love to go and find out.
Yeah.
And then giving away, just the first chapter of the book. I love your style. You're so relatable to have someone that's just like, hey, I can go really deep in all this like science and understanding, but you know what? We're also going to have fun while we do it. And all of your pop cultural references, I got to say, they just they make me understand it so much more. So, Mary, I thank you so much for everything that you're doing to help us just to grow as better human beings as we live out our purpose on purpose. Thank you for your work.
Thank you.
All right, guys, until next time, continue putting in the work of building your life and leadership on the rocks, the essential rocks. God bless. Remember, the most essential rock you can build your life and leadership on is the rock of Jesus Christ. Today's Bible verse comes from Joshua chapter 1, verse 9. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be frightened and do not be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. Hey, it's Bethany again. If you're enjoying the Leadership on the Rocks podcast, be sure to subscribe and follow so you don't miss a single episode. Also, be sure to rate the show. We hope to earn 5 stars in serving you in leadership, and through your ratings, it'll help us get the word out about what we do here at Leadership on the Rocks. If you feel this podcast is helpful, be sure to share it with your friends, family, and coworkers, or anyone who wants to grow in leadership, but also have harmony between their work and home life. Thanks, and I'll see you again in the next episode.